Welcome back to the Nimber Tribe Podcast. Today we have a very special guest in the studio. His name is Gonzalo Leon Uriarte. He is a former professor of psychology and a most multifaceted entrepreneur who specializes in building psychological safety and emotional intelligence, both personally and in the workspace. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you, Nina, for that wonderful presentation. I'm happy to be here.
Let's dive a little bit into your background story. Each superhero has their own origin story, and I'm curious to learn what got you interested in psychology and emotional intelligence in the first place.
Sure, thank you. That's always a good way to begin. I would say that my passion for psychology began at a very early age. I am born and raised in Stockholm, Sweden, by South American parents. So in my home, we only spoke Spanish, right? I think my passion for psychology and people and personal development all started when I was left in kindergarten in Sweden, because this was actually the first time I heard Swedish. So I didn't even know I was in a Swedish-speaking country, or in Sweden for that matter. So when I was dropped at kindergarten, it was a shock. Instant psychological unsafety and emotional intelligence, I would say, was my tool to understand people, why they do different things. In my home, we said and did a specific thing when we wanted to say something, but that was very different in the Swedish community or in the Swedish culture. So that was the first spark for my interest in psychology. It was already at kindergarten. I could add briefly that this built up more momentum because when I was 6 years old, my optician told me that I am colorblind. And this was the first time I thought to myself, like, wow, reality is different for everyone. Like, there's a reality behind reality that's feeding us information, and we are creating our own experience from this information. So I remember thinking to myself with 6 years that there must be a system in how this experience is put together. And if I understand how that system functions, I can use that to develop in ways that I want to. So I would say that kindergarten and 6 years colorblind were the sparks that later on obviously motivated me to study psychology at the university, whereas it really took off.
I think that's such a powerful story, and also it must be a very interesting experience that probably not too many other people have gone through. But I feel like for many people who are very interested in psychology and also in maybe like personality tests and understanding people better, like there's this whole self-help world. And I often feel that it comes from a place of like, I wanted to fit in at some point and I didn't. So I had to figure out what was the glue between people and how could I find my place in that kind of environment.
Right. It's all about trying to find ways to survive yourself. And then you learn different tools and processes and you start to see, hey, this works, this doesn't. And that's also how you can help people. Like later I worked as a coach for several years and I used all these tools that I came up with myself, just like you, I guess.
Yeah, in many ways. Can you maybe walk us just quickly through that? Because you became actually a professor at university and then you transitioned into more of an entrepreneurial journey. Can you just give us a few pointers of how that came about? And also the point that you just mentioned, like how are you now using that kind of knowledge more to help other people?
Sure. Well, at first I thought that I wanted to become a licensed therapist. It wasn't until I started studying to become a therapist at university that I noticed that my passion was greater for understanding how we work, not only in regards to pathologies, but also like how does creativity work? How does well-being work? How does perception work, right? And how I can use this in my advantage with myself and my coaching clients. So while studying, the head of the psychological institution said that my way of thinking was better suited to work as a teacher at the university and with research. So said and done, I gave up the idea of becoming a licensed therapist. And I really fell in love with the whole knowledge sharing phenomenon. That's part of the academic side of psychology. Seeing people really understand maybe complex theory or model, understand it in simpler terms so as to apply it in their own experience. That was really what kept me going, and that sparked my passion. So it was more the connecting with people that drove me.
Yeah, we've already touched a couple of times on different terms. One of them is psychological safety and the other one is emotional intelligence. Can you just run us through of like a quick definition of how you look at these things so we can get a better understanding of them?
Sure. Well, I've built everything really upon these ideas of perception, right? So if you think I see certain colors and you see another set of colors because we are different inside, we have different cells in our eyes. It's the same with psychological safety in the sense that all the typical descriptions of psychological safety are talking about the behavioral results of being psychologically safe. That is like the colors that you see. It's the result of something, right? While I have found that when you want to communicate knowledge to someone and have them understand it so as to use it, you need to reduce it to something simpler, the mechanics that drive the whole phenomenon. And when it comes to psychological safety, that is, I would say, the easiest way to understand it is by remembering fight or flight mode. This is something that we all have heard about. It's a pretty common concept. Today they call it fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which we're not going to dive deeper into. But what my point is that psychological safety can be seen as the complete opposite of fight or flight mode. So in fight or flight mode, your amygdala gets activated, activity in your prefrontal cortex goes back, and all the blood goes from your organs out to your arms and legs so you can run and fight. While psychological safety is the opposite. You have all your blood activity and processes going on in your organs, so you have a high immune system and your amygdala is not screaming, and you have your prefrontal cortex that is working, right? Which is good for flow state and for creativity and problem solving. So when we start to understand psychological safety in those simpler terms, the opposite of fight or flight mode, it's easier to understand when we are in fight or flight or when we're feeling psychologically safe. So the next step here is to something that I call my mother's white Volvos. Now, I'm going to run this through pretty fast because it's a core part of how I work with people when I'm coach them. When my mother bought a brand new white Volvo, I started seeing white Volvos everywhere. This is a very typical phenomenon, like people see. I had long hair a couple of years ago and I saw people with long hair everywhere. So what we have is what we see, right? Because we get flooded by so much data all the time that our brain needs to filter out. So if you're teaching psychological safety at the workplace in higher behavioral level, if the employees or the leadership or the team haven't cultivated this understanding inside of them so that they can understand when they're in fight or flight mode or when they're in psychological safety, then it will not be part of their white Volvos. So you can have a bunch of strategies at the office, but if you haven't taught your employees or leadership to cultivate psychological safety within, they're not going to perceive it. It's not going to be registered. So that's why it's so important today for organizations to help both their leaders, but also their whole workforce in their personal development, because that's where the change happens that you bring back to work, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And I really enjoy that mental picture of like, okay, psychological safety is the opposite of fight or flight, because I think it makes it so much easier for us to register when are we actually feeling safe? What is that? It's so much easier to get a mental picture of how that might feel. And I think it also speaks beautifully to that connection between stress and performance, because if we think about, like you talked about, the blood is going like away from the organs and away from the brain so we can like run or fight. That's not what we want to be in when we are sitting in a boardroom and we are discussing really important topics. No. We want to be in a state where we are calm, where we are collected, where we have all that energy focused on the brain so that we can process the information and then make a very logical decision. You touched upon that there is a connection between the leaders having this awareness and then that being reflected in how the organization is kind of run. Where could a leader that is listening to this start to kind of get an understanding for themselves so that they can bring it into their work environment?
Well, first off, I would say that it's important to seek out professional assistance, right? It's every topic that you dive into has deep levels of complexity, and when you're coached by someone that works with people like you do or like I do, that's an easier path to start finding tools that will be more impactful faster. That being said, I think the first step is to conceptualize psychological safety in this way that we have today, the opposite of fight or flight, so that you can start to notice when you're inside of it and when you're not. That's the first step. Let your own white Volvos start changing if you're a leader, right? Don't even start thinking about how you can make your employer safe, because what actually makes your workforce safe is feeling authenticity. And you become authentic when you start to know how to be safe in yourself. And this is where emotional intelligence starts to overlap with psychological safety, because emotional intelligence is being able to spot or to observe when you are in fight or flight mode or when you're psychologically safe, so that you can navigate. Maybe you need to take a little breather. You need to be authentic with yourself and the emotions you have in your body when you communicate with your team. So as you start to change as an individual, as a leader, but as an individual up and foremost, that's when you will start to act differently and more authentically at work, which will create the ripple effect of at least paving the way for your workforce to become psychologically safe at work. And then we also have this other side of the coin, which is assisting the actual team to internalize psychological safety, so they're white Volvos, so they can sync with your efforts at work to be safe.
Yeah, let's come back to that in a second. What I find really interesting there is that you are talking about, okay, I need to understand my emotional state that I'm currently in, and then to feel safe enough to kind of express that. If we look at society at large, there are a few emotions that are really okay to have at work, like drive, positivity, these kind of things. But there are other emotions that are not as tolerated, or we just don't want them, we don't appreciate them as much, like anger or sadness or grief and things like that. How can I react as a leader when I feel into these emotions that are maybe less accepted? How can I handle them? What should I do? Should I switch over to something more positive? Should I sit in them? What would you recommend?
It's always dangerous to switch over to something positive if that is not authentic to you as a person. The people in the room will sense if you're applying a strategy and kind of disassociating from your emotions to make it look like you're okay with whatever situation at hand. So I would not say that is the important part. That's actually dangerous. What I would recommend is a tool I use with my clients that I call Say It Like a Child. Now, if you remember being a child, or if you've seen children, of course, they don't really sugarcoat stuff. Like if they have to go to the bathroom, they're going to be like, I have to poo, right? And this authenticity creates safety around it. They don't have people second guessing them, right? So in the situation of a leader that's working on his own psychological safety internally, if you yet have not reached that level where you can spot yourself reacting emotionally so you can retract and work on that emotion, then you can just raise your hand and say, hey, now we need to take 5. It's important to not try to shove away the negative emotion and give some space for it. Maybe you should not do the actual transformation of that emotion with your team, but you can take 5. You can go out for a walk. And the team will notice when the leader is in a negative emotion, and taking a pause there will actually create safety if you reinforce that pause with a calm and safe emotion after the pause, right?
I love that. Sense. Yeah, 100%. And I think it becomes really interesting here because even if we take this out of the kind of working environment, I love the idea of taking 5. I think that is an awesome strategy also to show your employees that it is okay to have feelings, how you are handling them. Like, I think there's a lot of safety built in just that move. But if we take it out of the working environment and say, like, I'm just at home, I'm trying to learn how to be more in tune with my emotions. How can I work with more challenging emotions that we often label bad emotions? How can I work through them?
That's an important question, because you're raising something that's extra valid in the post-pandemic world of work, where we're actually working in our homes. So how we have to feel psychologically safe at home as well. That being said, I think it's important to conceptualize the parts in you that want the situation to be different, right? Because that's what's happening. That's why we contract in our emotions. We don't want it to be like the way we're perceiving it to be, right? So to handle that, we need to become friends with the parts of us that wants a specific situation to be different. And this needs to be done in a couple of steps. First, you need to understand that you do have a part inside of yourself that is shaming, that is putting guilt, and that is resisting the situation. That is what creates the negative and unsafe emotion. So the first step is to accept that you have these emotions. The second step is to conceptualize them in a way that you can interact with that part of yourself. So I usually say that you should put a name on the part of yourself that wants the situation to be different, and have compassion with that part. Now, I've named my part that's very self-judgy and shamey. I call it Gonzalo, and it's a little word game because I see it as a dragon I need to slay, and I don't want this dragon to grow and become big, right? Because I have to slay him. So I make him cute and small, and I start to create a jargon, like internal jokes or a specific tonality that I only use when I talk to that part inside of me that wants the situation to be different. So it could be when I've done something that I don't like and I want it to be better, then I can start laughing and having this inner dialogue with, now you're out again, Gonzalo, right? That's a really good step to start in becoming aware of when these emotions show up. And then there are more steps after, of course, that you also can.
Do you want to run us through them right now?
Sure. After naming the parts of you that want the situation to be different, I usually say, let's not avoid emotions. Feel everything. That is an important step of going past emotions. So I usually say, wear even your negative traits as a crown. Like, be the best at always doing this thing wrong, right? I'm just brainstorming an idea, a situation. Let's say I feel very insecure when I meet new people. The first step would be to start being the best at being insecure with new people. So when I meet new people, I'm like, hey guys, my name is Gonzalo, I'm really insecure with new people. And make that a mantra, right? Because then you're actually taking away all the leverage that insecurity has in your emotions and your behavior, if that makes sense.
100%, yes. What I hear there is that we need quite some self-compassion if we're going through this. Like, we need to acknowledge that we have emotions that are uncomfortable to sit with. We might want to find a name and a cute picture so that we can have more of a dialogue, more of a distance, but that still allows us to be in very close contact to these parts. But there is often, like you already touched on, this kind of shaming, blaming aspect that can become really loud of like, why am I depressed? I shouldn't feel like this. I have all of these things in my life and still I don't feel like $1,000,000. Do you have any strategies around like working with these parts, or is it again to just picture that part as well and then having the same kind of dialogue that you just had with a more challenging feeling?
Well, something that I have learned lately, working with my own challenges during the pandemic and post-pandemic, is that it's really not enough to only work on your thoughts and your emotions. You need to have a multidisciplinary approach to wellness. So you should do this kind of therapeutic work with yourself and work on your meta-awareness about your own emotions. But you also need other inputs that help you in this journey. So I've realized that you need to have a rich and thriving life to have resilience and recovery, right? And that could mean many different things. A vital part is physical activity. So I would never tell a client to only use these tools that we've been talking about. It is also important to move, right? The brain works in 90-minute cycles. You need to take pauses all the time, and you need to exert force. You need to run, you need to lift weights, or whatever sport that you find fun, right? It's all a part of regulating your central nervous system with the natural processes of your body. So you need to work on these different tools that help you cultivate emotional intelligence, and then use physical activities to frame it and to back it all up, right? That will help you find a way to sit with hard and difficult emotions, which is what emotional intelligence is all about. And it is what creates authenticity, psychological safety, both at work and in your personal.
100%. And I think it's so crucial to think about the body and the mind, because we often see them as separate things, but they are so closely connected. And what you just said, like the physical activity, going out in nature, eating food that actually fuels you, all of these things are so important and can also really help if we feel very stuck with a more mental problem, like let's say depression, or just not really feeling ourselves for the last few days, to maybe not sit in that forever and go through all the mental exercises and all of that, but actually remember that we have a body and that body also has needs, and then kind of oscillate between those two different concepts to get the best out of it. I love that.
Very well.
You also talked about the challenges that now have come with remote work. And I think that's a very interesting one, because now we work where previously we ate with our families or we have the desk set up in our bedrooms. And that creates a completely new set of challenges. Is there anything that you do in your training to specifically talk to these specific challenges?
Well, I noticed that this became a real problem when I worked 5 years fully remote building Quora, the Swedish version of Quora, the knowledge sharing platform. So that was my step out of the academic world. I worked as a teacher in psychology, and I coached people in their personal development. And then I was offered this opportunity to translate, launch, and scale the Swedish Quora community. And I was just working 70 hours a week from my home. I worked 5 years fully remote and noticed that it became associated with performance and stress being in my own home. And I had to go outside to relax, right? So it's really important to have specific places in your apartment where you only do work, so that you still can have this automatic association to relaxation and the rest of your home. So that's one important aspect. Another important aspect is to take, I'd rather take many short pauses throughout the day. I work in 90-minute sprints where I literally put my phone on 90 minutes and put it on silence, and I work for 90 minutes, and then regardless of how I feel, I go out and take a pretty swift walk. So even if it's a pretty short walk, it still provides a kind of a reset where I can try to be emotionally intelligent and feel what I'm feeling, right? Am I in safety or fight or flight? Because it's a continuum, so that I can get back to flow state again, right? That's very important for recovery when you're working from your home. Besides that, I would say all of these more personal aspects, having a social life, maybe doing exercise with a friend, or planning a weekend away or going to the movies. It's very important to have a rich social life for recovery when working from your personal space.
That is a perfect addition to these kind of the dimensions that we have talked about. Like we have the body, we have the mind, but then we also have an overarching life. And I think that is what really gets mixed now that we work from home, because we might pick up the toddler in between two different calls, or like there are so many things that now get mixed that previously had like a specific place and time where things were happening. So it's super important to have these tools.
Yeah, I think this is so important that today I've built a program where I want to help organizations that have hybrid and remote workers with a kind of a coaching subscription. So at first it's a 5-week program that teaches how you can relate to psychological safety and emotional intelligence and high performance with recovery. That package with an ongoing coaching subscription, so as to help your workforce that is working from their homes in being resilient or building up resilience and recovery and having a thriving personal life. That it's extra important when you're working from your personal spaces.
I find it so funny that we understand this notion so well when it comes to athletes. Like we understand they need to rest, they need their nutrition, they need their sleep, they need to have kind of a community around them that really supports them so they can perform at their best. And they maybe have like races, I don't know, once a month, depending on the sport that you're doing. You're showing up to work every day, and there's still this misconception that you can do without it. Like just wake up in the morning, roll out of bed, you're going to do your best work.
Right. It's so crazy when you put it like that.
Yeah. It is really fun.
Also, an interesting thing we can learn from the elite athlete community is to always be brave and try new stuff. They're always looking for new ways to sustain high performance or to push it a little more, right? So they try these unconventional or innovative ideas or ancient methods. I know that breathwork and other breathing techniques and mindfulness has become very popular since a long time now in the athlete community, and we should learn from them. We should apply breath work in these daily cycles that I mentioned, which actually is part of another project that I'm doing, but I think we're going to get into that in a while.
100%. And I want to kind of circle back to what you just said before that, because what I heard there is that a lot of these tools that you are using are something where we focus maybe not necessarily on so much what we do while we are at work, but we use our off time to do the recovery, to build the resilience. Can you touch a little bit more on that concept and why that is so important?
Sure, that it is vital actually, because there's a lot of science that is indicating that it is in our free time, in our personal spaces, that we recover to come back and fight another day at work. So when we have friction in our personal life, that is when we fail to recover enough. It's not when we have friction at work. Work is inherent to a certain degree of stress because you have to perform. But you recover from that work-related stress in your personal time. That's why it's so important for organizations today to take a little leap and start including these new ideas in how they support their workforce, because they need tools and ongoing support to have different situations in their personal life become a source of resilience and recover. And it's due time, I would say.
100%, yeah. And I'm looking forward to way more companies kind of applying these kind of different techniques so that we can perform better and just feel safer in ourselves and in the environments that we are in.
There's so many gains.
Is there anything more that you wanted to mention around? You were talking about breath work just a second ago. What are kind of these different tools that we can apply besides from the ones that we have already mentioned?
Well, I'm working besides exercise and nutrition. We haven't gone into deep on nutrition, but that's also very important. And these different tools and to have support from professionals in your personal development. I would say breathwork is a really good example of something you can learn to inject in your daily life without it taking up too much time. Now, I am, as of right now, actually doing a training to become a facilitator with breathwork. And I aim at using certain parts. For an example, in the morning when I wake up, I am applying a specific breathing method for like 10 to 20 seconds, the first thing I do in bed before I stand. And it's designed to trigger adrenaline in the body, really. It wakes me up. So I do this short little breathing session, and then I go up and brush my teeth and take a shower, and I'm already awake in a completely different manner than if I would wait for my coffee that always has the drop after. So breath work in small injections with a certain intention to activate or to calm the system down is a really, really good technique.
I'm a big fan myself. I actually used the Yoga Nidra this afternoon to get like a mini nap in before doing this interview. Yeah, I really enjoy that. Just like 20 minutes, you put it on, like there are so many versions on YouTube, and I love the app called Open. Unfortunately, no advertisement here, but no. Maybe one day.
It's good.
And it really helps to just push the reset button and then feel refreshed for the rest of the day. So that is a very powerful tool. Anything else that we should think about in that realm, or have we kind of covered the ground?
If anything, you don't forget to have fun, right? Beauty and awe in life is very important. Me and my colleague now are planning an event where we are mixing guided meditations and classical live music inside of an old church. So we have this event company that's niched for wellness. We call it Cantarell with a Q. This event is partially to regulate your nervous system, but also to just have an amazing experience. Like it's harp and a viola to guided meditation inside of an acoustically amazing church. We need to do these kinds of things to be happy. It's part of our personal development and resilience.
I love it.
Right, me too.
If people would like to work with you on one of these different ventures, where can they go to find you?
For anyone listening that wants to learn more, you're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn, on my profile, which we probably can link to. And we can also link to my different websites for the remote work and this wellness agency. And the description here, I guess.
100%. Yes, we're going to have that down.
So please reach out. Yeah.
We have that down in the show notes.
Okay.
All right, Tribe. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and a comment below. There's going to be new episodes dropping every Wednesday, covering everything from entrepreneurship to health, basically giving you all the tools that you need to peak perform in business and in your life. So please make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. This is a one-woman show. There is no network, there are no sponsors, and there is no editing team behind this. So it's up to me and you to spread the word about it. So if you have a friend who might benefit from what you learned today in this episode, please make sure to share a link with them. I see you next Wednesday. Much love.